New Denver, Colorado, 1887. That city rose up like a steel mirage from the prairie dust, all wrought iron balconies and gas lamp glimmers, with streets so tight they could squeeze the truth clean out of a man. It was a place where dreams strutted in polished boots by day and slipped down alleyways by night. Lena Carson arrived in that town with little more than a carpetbag and a pair of eyes too bright for the city's liking. She come from back east, Pittsburgh, or maybe Philadelphia, she never said, and found work as a seamstress in the garment quarter. Folks called her quiet, but that wasn't quite right. She had a silence that waited, that watched. One evening, with the fog rolling off the river and the bells of St. Ignatius chiming through soot-colored air, Lena made a mistake. She knocked on the wrong door. She'd meant to visit Mrs. Talbot, a widow known for keeping extra thread and stories too strange for Sunday. But in the city, even a single wrong turn can change a life. The building she entered was tall, dark red brick, with numbers smudged by time and smoke. Her knuckles hit the wood 3 times, and it opened. A man stood there, coat unbuttoned, boots well worn, the scent of tobacco clinging like a second skin. He had a slow sort of stillness, like a man who never rushed for anything, not even salvation. His jaw was rough with 2 days' shadow, and his hat sat low, casting shade over eyes the color of a storm rolling off the prairie. "Miss Carson," he said, voice like gravel and velvet. "Took you long enough." Now Lena, she wasn't a woman easily spooked. But that voice, that look, it caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I think I've got the wrong." "No," the cowboy interrupted. "You got the right door." She should have turned, should have stepped back into the fog, and chalked it up to city mischief. But she didn't. Something about the way he said it, not as a greeting, but a certainty, made her stay. "I've been waiting," he said, stepping aside. Waiting. For her? That made no sense. She'd never laid eyes on him before. "I think you've mistaken me for." He shook his head once, slow and final. "No, ma'am. I know who I was waiting for. It's you. Now, I ain't saying ghosts are real or fate rides it on horseback, but sometimes the wind changes, and you just know your life ain't gonna be the same come morning. And that, friend, is where this tale begins." The door closed behind Lena with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot in that still hallway. She stood just inside, the air heavy with pipe smoke and something older, like leather, sweat, and secrets. The parlor stretched long and narrow, lit by a single oil lamp that threw shadows like ghosts on the wallpaper. The cowboy, he hadn't given his name, walked with the slow certainty of a man used to silence. He motioned to a velvet chair near the fire. "You ought to sit," he said. "You look like a breeze could take you." Lena didn't sit. Instead, she squared her shoulders and looked him square in the face. "Why'd you say you were waiting for me?" He watched her for a heartbeat too long, then turned and poured 2 cups of black coffee from a kettle warming on the hearth. He handed her one. His hands were big, weathered, the kind that looked more at home breaking horses or stringing barbed wire than pouring drinks. "I got your name 3 nights ago," he said. "From who?" He didn't answer straight. "From a woman with no voice and eyes like ice. Left it in a letter on my sill. Said you'd be here. Said you'd knock." Now Lena's heart pounded hard enough to crack ribs. She hadn't told a soul she was coming. Her boarding house was clear across the city, and she'd only left after the foreman's apprentice tried laying a hand where it didn't belong. "You expect me to believe that?" she said. "No," he replied. "But you should believe this. I know you're in trouble, and trouble's been looking for me too long for this to be coincidence." The fire crackled as if to punctuate his words. Outside, the city creaked and shifted, carriages clattered, dogs barked, but in here it was quiet. Too quiet. "I don't even know your name," she said. He nodded like he'd expected that. "Call me Cutter." That was a name that carried weight. Not common, not soft. Just Cutter, sharp, fast, dangerous. Lena felt the room get smaller. Her fingers curled tighter round the coffee cup. "What do you want from me?" He met her gaze, level as a fence post. "Not a thing. But that don't change what's coming. You knocked, and now the trail's changed for us both." She looked away then, not because she was afraid, but because she wasn't sure if she believed him, or if she believed herself. Her breath fogged the window behind her. She saw her reflection in the glass, dim and blurry, standing beside a man she didn't know in a place she didn't mean to enter. And somewhere, deep in her gut, she knew the trail she was on had forked. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, catching in the light like ash from an old fire. The snow whispered against the window, soft like a lullaby, but heavy with promise. Cutter leaned back in his chair, legs stretched out, boots crossed like a man with nowhere to be. But Lena, she could feel the tension thick as molasses in that room. She didn't sit. Instead, she wandered slow-like, fingers trailing the edges of old furniture worn with time and use. The place wasn't much, just a parlor, a kitchen tucked behind a curtain, and a single stairwell climbing up into shadows. But everything was tidy, cared for. Not what you'd expect from a cowboy who answered doors like he was waiting for fate to come calling. "You said a woman left you a letter," Lena said. "What kind of woman?" Cutter's eyes flicked toward the fire. "Didn't catch her name, but I know what she was." "What's that?" He looked her square in the eyes. "One of them that see too much. Not fortune tellers, exactly. More like whisper catchers. Folks say they hear things in dreams." She left the letter a rose dried black, and one word burned into the paper. Lena. Lena's breath caught. She thought of her grandmother, a gullah-root woman who whispered to the moon and tied herbs above every door. She'd warned Lena once, long ago. "Blood always calls, child, and it don't care what road you run." She turned away, fighting a tremble. "This don't make sense." "No," Cutter agreed, "but sense don't always steer the trail." There was a knock then, not soft like hers had been, but firm and sharp, like a hammer striking wood. Cutter stood, smooth and slow. He didn't reach for a gun, but his shoulders squared in a way that said he was ready to fight or run, depending on what came through that door. Lena moved toward the fireplace, heart pounding. The knock came again. He opened it. A boy no older than 10 stood on the stoop, hat too big, scarf nearly swallowing his chin. His eyes were wide and rimmed red with cold. In his hands, he held an envelope stained with something dark. "For the lady," the boy whispered, thrusting it at Cutter. "She's got to read it before the moon's full." And then he turned and ran, fast as a jackrabbit in a thunderclap, vanishing into the snowy dark. Cutter shut the door and handed her the envelope. It was sealed with wax, deep red like dried blood. Lena stared at it a long moment before she broke it open. Inside was a single page. Her name, her birth date, a place, Temple Street Station, 11 o'clock tomorrow night, and 3 words, written in a shaky hand: "He's still alive." Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. Not yet. Just clutched the note to her chest as her breath came sharp. Cutter moved closer. "Who's alive?" She didn't answer right away. Couldn't. Her voice came slow, like the first thaw after a long winter. "My brother," she said. "He died in a fire. 10 years ago. Only maybe he hadn't." Cutter didn't speak for a long while after that. Just poured another cup of coffee and watched Lena like a man sizing up a storm on the horizon. "A fire, you say?" he murmured at last. "But now they're saying he's walking in the land of the living." Lena nodded, the paper still clutched in her hand, her fingers shaking just enough to betray what her eyes tried to hide. "It was the Spring Street Orphan's house," she said, voice distant, remembering. "He was 9. I was 12. Fire took the whole place. They never found his body, just ashes. I went east with an aunt, and that was that." Cutter looked into the fire. Ain't nothing in this world just that. Not when letters come knocking on doors a decade later. They sat in silence for a spell, the kind that stretches like prairie sky, wide and full of things unsaid. When the clock on the mantel ticked past midnight, Lena rose. "I'm going to Temple Street tomorrow night." Cutter didn't try to stop her. He just nodded once. "You ain't going alone." The next day crawled by like a wounded rattler. Snow piled on the windowsills. Horses trudged through slush and grime, and city folk pulled scarves tight as they hurried past with narrowed eyes and suspicious glares. Lena spent the morning at her boarding house, gathering what little she had. She left a note for Mrs. Allen, just in case. By dusk, she met Cutter in front of his building. He wore a long duster now, collar high, and had that still, dangerous air again. No gun on his hip, but Lena figured a man like him didn't need steel to be lethal. They walked through alleys and side streets, avoiding the gaslit boulevards and the eyes that watched too much. Temple Street sat near the old rail yards, where abandoned warehouses sagged like tired drunks, and the smell of coal lingered long past the trains. At 10:55, they arrived. The station was half crumbling, shuttered since '84, after a derailment took 20 souls. But tonight, one lantern flickered from the rafters. "He's coming," Cutter said, quiet as a prayer. Lena stepped into the light. A figure emerged from the dark, tall, ragged coat, slow gait, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Lena's breath caught. "Micah," she whispered. The man stopped. He didn't speak. She stepped forward, hand outstretched. But then he ran. Not toward her. Away. "Wait!" she shouted, chasing, boots skidding over wet stone. He darted between buildings, across old tracks, through steam rising from a busted pipe. Cutter followed, his stride smooth and sure. They lost him at the switchyard. Nothing left but fog and the echo of boots on brick. Lena collapsed onto an old crate, breath-heaving. Cutter stood beside her. "You sure that was him?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "I'd know his walk anywhere." Cutter looked out into the dark. "Then someone's been keeping him hidden. And they didn't expect you to come knocking." Lena looked up. "What do we do now?" Cutter tilted his hat down, voice low. "We start digging. And we don't stop till we find what's been buried." Morning rolled in heavy with fog, a kind that hugged low to the cobblestone streets like it was listening. Lena hadn't slept a wink, and neither had Cutter. He sat near the window of her room, chair leaned back, eyes watching the alley below. He hadn't said much since the chase, but he didn't have to. His silence said plenty. "You reckon that really was Micah?" she asked, her voice gravelly from the cold and the run. Cutter looked her way, then back outside. "Wasn't no phantom, if that's what you're a-skin." Boots left prints. Door slammed shut. "He's flesh and blood, all right." Lena pressed her forehead to the glass. "Then why run? Why not come to me?" Cutter didn't answer straight off. Just picked up a slip of paper he'd found in the switchyard. A matchbook. Worn down, water-stained, but the name still legible, the Marlowe House. Lena narrowed her eyes. "That some kind of saloon?" "Used to be," Cutter said. "Back in '82. It was a club for high rollers. Cards, girls, and secrets folks paid good money to keep." "And now?" Cutter smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Now it's something else. A house for ghosts. Quiet ones." That afternoon, they went to the Marlowe. It was an old brick mansion crouched behind iron gates on the edge of Callahan Street. Ivy strangled the walls, and the curtains were drawn against daylight. A brass knocker shaped like a lion's head glared at them as Cutter lifted it and let it fall. An old man answered, thin as a fence rail, with skin like worn paper and a cough that shook his bones. "No appointments today," he rasped. Cutter didn't budge. "Ain't here for games. We're looking for someone. Boy might have been brought here years back. Name's Lena Carson." The man stiffened just enough for Lena to see it. "No one by that name here." "You sure about that?" Cutter said, stepping forward, voice calm but coiled like a snake. "Folks forget," the old man muttered, "or they end up wishing they had." Lena moved closer. "He's my brother. Please." The man hesitated, then stepped aside. "Ask your questions. But I didn't open this door." Inside, it was velvet and shadows, red wallpaper, the kind that drank a lamplight, and portraits of men with hard eyes and women without names. The air smelled of cedar smoke and something sour underneath. They were led to a parlor where time had stopped. That's where they found her, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a cane carved from black walnut. Her dress was old-fashioned, but her eyes were sharper than any blade Cutter'd ever seen. "Miss Duval," the old man whispered, then left. Lena stepped forward. "I'm looking for my brother. I was told this place." Miss Duval raised a hand. "This place sees many faces. Some come here looking for sin. Some for shelter. Some just to disappear. Which one was your brother? Lena swallowed. A boy 9 years old. Brown eyes. Quiet. He went missing after a fire at Spring Street. Duval studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed and tapped her cane. He came through here once, she said. About 6 years back. Didn't say a word. Just sat by the hearth like he was waiting to forget something. One of my girls found him near the docks. Lena's heart pounded. Where is he now? Duval's gaze turned to Cutter, then back to Lena. He left 3 weeks ago. But he didn't leave alone. A man came looking. Said he was kin. Showed papers. Cutter's jaw tightened. And you believed him? Didn't have a reason not to, Duval said. But if you're here now, I reckon that's changed. Lena nodded. Do you know where they went? Miss Duval stood, slow, as if rising from years she hadn't wanted to live through, only that they headed east, toward a warehouse on the edge of the rail line. Number 14. But be careful, Miss Carson. Some folks stay hidden for a reason. Out in the street again, Cutter turned to Lena. You still want to see this through? Lena looked out toward the rail line, her breath fogged in the cold. If he's alive, I have to. Cutter nodded. Then we ride at dusk. Dusk fell hard on the city, dragging long shadows down the alleyways like a tired dog. The snow had turned to slush, and the streets reeked of coal, smoke, and secrets. Lena pulled her scarf high as they neared the rail line, boots crunching over broken glass and cinder. Warehouse 14 wasn't marked, just a slouched building with rust bleeding down its corrugated walls. But the number had been scratched faint onto the side, just enough for someone paying attention to catch it. Cutter stopped her with a hand. This could be a trap. Lena looked up at him. It's always a trap, but I'm going in anyway. That earned her the ghost of a smile. He checked the knife tucked in his coat. I'll follow. They slipped through a busted side door, the hinges crying out like a widow in mourning. Inside was dark, too dark, but their boots echoed loud enough to raise the dead. Old crates loomed like tombstones, casting tall black shapes in the lantern light Cutter struck. The smell of dust and oil hung thick, but then faint, just barely. Lena heard it. Breathing. Soft. Careful. Not hers. Not Cutter's. She raised her hand. Micah, she whispered. From behind a crate, a figure moved, slow, cautious. A shadow stepping out of time. It was him. Older, yes, but she saw it in the set of his jaw, in the fear in his eyes that only she could read. Her knees went weak. Micah, she breathed, stepping forward, but a voice cut through the still. That's far enough. A man stepped from the catwalk above, long coat flapping behind him like wings of a carrion bird. His face was lean, with eyes like river stone and a smile full of rot. Cutter's hand went to his knife. Who are you? The man tilted his head. Call me Mr. Hall. And you're trespassing. Lena stepped between them. Why is he here? What did you do to him? Mr. Hall laughed. Nothing he didn't ask for. Boy came to me on his own. Needed protection. A name. And I gave it to him. He was 9, she spat. Old enough to know the world. Don't give out kindness for free. Micah stepped forward then, voice raw and broken. He kept me from the streets, Lena. But I didn't know what he was. I didn't know what he'd want in return. Mr. Hall's smile thinned. He owes me. Still does. Cutter stepped forward now, slow as sunrise. You can try to keep him, but I promise, you won't like what that costs. The man's eyes gleamed. You gonna kill me in front of the lady? Cutter's voice dropped low. If I have to. For a moment, the air froze, like the city itself was holding its breath. Then Mr. Hall chuckled. Fine. Take him. But he'll be back. They always come back. Cutter didn't blink. Not this time. Back in the cold, with Micah between them, Lena felt the weight shift. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting. And she had her brother beside her, and a cowboy who didn't talk much. But when he did, the world listened. They didn't say much on the walk back. Sometimes the best kind of talking is the kind that don't need words. Micah hadn't said much since they left the warehouse. Just clung to Lena like a ghost tangent to the edge of the light. They walked in silence through streets, still wet with melted snow, Cutter walking behind like a shadow with boots. Back at Cutter's place, the fire was warm and the kettle hissed. Lena helped Micah into a chair, knelt beside him like she used to when he'd scrape his knees on the orchard ladder. "You ain't dead," she whispered, brushing dust from his hair. He smiled faintly, tired and small. "Not yet." Cutter poured coffee into a chipped mug, placed it in Micah's hands, and leaned against the mantel. "He ain't sick," he said, "but he's been kept small. Fed lies instead of food. Hall's kind know how to keep chains without ever touching steel." Lena nodded. "We'll get him strong again. Find a place, maybe up north. Somewhere quiet." Micah stirred. "I heard him talking, Lena. Hull. He's got names. A list. People he sells to others." She stiffened. "You mean children?" Micah nodded. Cutter's gaze darkened. "How many?" "Dozens," Micah whispered. "All under false names. He calls it the ledger. Keeps it in a safe beneath the floorboards in his back office." Cutter exhaled slow. "Then I reckon we ain't done yet." That night, while Micah slept, Lena sat at the window watching fog slide down the street like spilled secrets. Cutter joined her, 2 tin cups of coffee in hand. "You don't have to help," she said, voice low. "I know," he replied. "Why are you?" He stared into the dark. "'Cause too many folks already turned their backs. And maybe I'm trying to make peace with a past that don't sleep well." She turned toward him. "You got family?" "Once. A wife. A daughter." "What happened?" His eyes didn't leave the street. "Same thing that always happens. The world wanted something from me I wasn't ready to give. So it took from me instead." She reached out, set her hand lightly on his. For the first time, he didn't flinch. By morning, they had a plan. Hall's safe. The ledger. And if they could get it, maybe they could crack open the whole rotten core of the city. But that kind of job required more than just fire in your belly. It required trust, courage, and maybe just a little madness. "Tonight," Cutter said, strap in on a pistol he hadn't worn in 5 years. "We finish this." They moved like smoke through back alleys, Cutter in front, Lena and Micah behind. The city had gone quiet, too quiet, like it knew what was coming. Temple Street was a ribbon of frost and gaslight, flickering like a last breath. The Marlowe house loomed ahead, still as a tomb. "You sure he keeps it here?" Cutter asked Micah. Micah nodded. "Safe's under the back office. Trapdoor behind the liquor rack." They circled to the rear, Cutter's boots making no more sound than a whisper. He picked the back lock with a quiet ease that told Lena he'd done this kind of work before, though she didn't ask when or how. Inside, it smelled of bourbon, coal, and secrets gone sour. The halls were dark, the walls thick with velvet and time. They crept past the parlor, past the staircase, until they reached Hall's private quarters. Micah pointed. "Behind that shelf." Cutter slid it aside. Sure enough, a square of old wood with seams just a shade too clean. He pried it up, and there it was, an iron safe bolted to stone, small but thick. He knelt beside it, fingers brushing the dial. "This ain't no padlock. It'll take time." But time wasn't something they had much of. The creak of a door upstairs. Voices. Hall wasn't alone. "Keep low," Cutter murmured. Lena crouched with Micah behind a bureau, while Cutter worked the dial, listening, turning, testing. His hands were steady, his breath calm. Footsteps on the stairs now. Lena's heart thundered. Micah gripped her hand like a lifeline. Cutter turned the last notch. Click. The safe opened. Inside was a black leather-bound book, heavy and worn. He flipped it open, pages filled with names, birth dates, sums of money. Not just children, men, women, all sold or lost to the dark. He stuffed it in his coat, just as the door burst open. Hall stood there with 2 brutes, pistols drawn. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. Angry. "I told you," he said, eyes on Lena. "They always come back." Cutter stood slow, the ledger in one hand, the other near his holster. "Yeah," he drawled. "But this time we brought fire." Hall laughed. "You think you're walking out with that?" Lena stepped out from cover then, her hand wrapped round the revolver Cutter had given her. Her aim wasn't perfect, but it was steady. "I think you're done talking." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos broke. Cutter fired first, clean, fast. One brute dropped. Lena's shot rang out next, wild, but close enough to drive the second man behind cover. Micah grabbed a lamp, smashed it into the third man's leg. Screaming, smoke, shouts. And then Cutter was on Hall. They struggled, fists and fury in the dark, but Cutter had something Hall didn't, a reason. He slammed Hall against the wall, breath ragged. "You hurt children," he growled. Hall spat blood. "You think this city cares?" Cutter's voice was gravel. "No, but we do." He knocked Hall cold. They fled through the alley with the ledger clutched tight, sirens echoing distantly. No one chased them. Not yet. Back at the safe house, they pored over the book. Names, locations, enough to bury Hall's whole operation. Cutter lit a cigar with shaking hands. "We take this to the marshal," he said. "We blow this whole thing open." Lena looked at her brother. "You ready?" Micah nodded. "Let's burn it down." They rode before dawn, wrapped in oilskin and purpose. The ledger, thick with names and sins, was strapped tight to Cutter's saddlebag. Snow flurried around them as they rode east, toward the city courthouse, toward Marshal Royce. "He's clean," Cutter had said. "Mean as a mule, but he don't take bribes. If anyone'll make this stick, it's him." The streets were slick and empty when they arrived. The courthouse clock struck 6, bells tolling like Judgment Day. Inside, Royce sat at his desk, boots on the corner, a mug of black coffee steaming nearby. Cutter dropped the ledger on his desk like a hammer. Royce raised an eyebrow. "What the devil's this?" "Everything," Lena said. "Names, sales, what they did, who they paid." Royce thumbed through the pages, face hardening. "Lord Almighty." Then he snapped it shut. "You're not safe. If Hall catches wind of this—" "He already has," Cutter said. "He'll come for us." "Then we'll be ready," the marshal growled. By sundown, wanted notices spread across the city like wildfire. Hall's name, his operation, his crimes. The ledger's copies were sealed and sent by rail to Denver and Cheyenne. It didn't take long for Hall to strike back. First, it was a message burned into the door of Cutter's place. "You'll regret this." Then came the bullet through the window, missed by inches. Next, a man from the Marlowe was found outside the courthouse, throat cut, coin in his hand. A warning. But Lena wasn't rattled. She'd lived too long in the shadows. She was done running. So they made a trap. Temple Street, the train depot. Cutter spread the word quiet-like. Hall would be trying to flee by private railcar, late-night departure, one bribe away from vanishing. Lena baited the hook. She let herself be seen. Let rumors fly that she was headed to Kansas with the boy. Hall took the bait. He came to the station flanked by 2 men, eyes hollow, jaw tight. Didn't speak a word as he boarded the railcar. Didn't notice the marshals, men hidden beneath blankets in the cargo car. Didn't see Cutter on the roof. Didn't expect Lena, standing in the aisle with her hand on a trigger. "Hello again," she said. Hall turned, slow, smirking. "Thought you'd be gone by now." "No," she said. "Not till this ends." Behind her, Royce stepped forward. "You're done, Hall." Guns came out quick, but not quicker than Cutter's. The shootout was fierce, short, and final. One of Hall's men went down. The other ran. Hall tried to shoot Lena, but she didn't flinch. She shot him first. When it ended, Cutter knelt beside Hall, the man choking on his own breath. His eyes found Lena. "You don't know what's coming." Cutter leaned close. "No, but I know what's leaving." Then the last breath rattled out, and silence settled. That night, the city changed. The ledger's truth swept through every paper and pulpit. The Marlowe was shut. The names inside faced justice, slow and bitter as molasses. And for the first time, Lena and Micah breathed free. Cutter stood at the edge of the street, watching them from beneath his hat. Smoke curled from his cigar, eyes tired but steady. "You did it," he said. Lena stepped beside him. "We did." Cutter didn't speak. He just looked east, toward the mountains, like a man who still had roads to walk. Spring came slow to the city, like it wasn't sure if it was welcome. Snow turned to rain, streets turned to mud, and the wind lost its bite. But with it came change, the quiet kind that don't ask for applause. The ledger had done its work. Trials began, some short, some long. Names once whispered in back rooms were now shouted in courtrooms. Justice had shown up wearing boots and dust. Lena walked those courthouse steps every day, not for revenge, but for remembrance. She needed to see it through. Micah stayed close, still shaken, still piecing himself together, but brighter now. Eating more, laughing sometimes. Cutter? He stayed too. Not because he had to, but because he said he hadn't finished the job. He spent his days helping the marshal, training younger deputies, patrolling corners where shadows liked to linger. But he always made it back by sundown, always knocked once before entering, even when the door was already open. Lena kept her sewing table near the window now. She'd taken in work again, dresses mostly, the kind that made women stand taller. One afternoon, she turned from the table and asked, "You ever think of staying?" Cutter didn't look up from where he was oiling his revolver. "I'm still here, ain't I?" She smiled. "That ain't the same." He set the gun aside, looked out the window. "I was a ghost when you knocked on that door. Thought I'd buried myself in peace and whiskey." She stepped closer. "And now," he turned, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Now I think maybe the world's not done with me. Least not while I got you two to watch over." That summer, they packed bags. Not to run, but to roam. They headed west for a time. Micah wanted to see mountains. Cutter knew trails no map had ever named. Lena brought her needles and thread, said she could set up shop wherever there was sky. They didn't call it leaving. They called it starting. And in the end, the city didn't forget the ledger. Didn't forget the boy they found or the cowboy who never said much but always showed up when it mattered. And it never forgot the woman who knocked on the wrong door and found the right man waiting.